green shots. Oh, morning.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, morning. Does anybody know if we're still on or should we reach out um to the chairs?
Uh, I guess we should.
I will, this is Heather. I'm in the car. I will text the chair to see if we're still on and I will round back up, okay?
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
And hey Heather, hey Danielle, it's Andre. I'm
Hey.
actually at the Capitol today. I'm about to walk into the hearing room anyway. It's all
Oh,
get a sense of what's going
see
on.
if anybody's there. If not, we could probably make this a really short, efficient meeting.
Ideally.
You know, no one was there when I was there earlier, and it is a tough day for people, but let me text him and see if I got any information, okay?
Thanks so much.
I'm told we are still having a meeting.
Hmm.
Is it in this room?
It
There were
should be
two-
the appropriate Zoom. I don't,
Okay.
I can't answer the room question.
Yeah, there
Heather,
was one link in the location and one in the body of the um, meeting announcement.
Heather, did they give a sense of how long till they could join?
I will find out. Hold on. Trust me, I know.
Are you
let
enjoying
me see
being
if I can find-
the go-between?
I am really enjoying this, like right before the holiday, as everyone
Real
else
good use
is,
of your
right?
time.
Yes. All right. Hold, please.
Hey, John, how long is your presentation?
Oh, I mean, I could do it pretty quickly.
All right.
Well, maybe we'll give them like 2 more minutes, and if not, maybe John and Jim, if you want to
Just jump
get
in.
started on it. Yeah, I'm excited to see it.
Great. There seems a big crowd on at least a big list of names here.
And it's actually great timing on the Stonington side. We were just talking about Circa at our climate change task force meeting, and Jim, thanks. I know you had talked with one of our Board of Selectmen members about maybe trying to see if we could do more as a region, like connecting with Brantford and some of the other towns in the region on some of our shared concerns.
Yeah, that would be great, I think.
So look,
Well,
I'm making a
I
good
would
use
say
of time.
Yeah, if we don't get somebody going in a minute, I think you should start.
Yeah, why don't we just start? I think we have a good group already on the line or in the room.
Okay, I'm happy to just jump in.
Thanks.
Let me see here.
So yeah, the first item of agenda is opening remarks from chairs, which I think we're just going to have to forego. So John, you're up.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm happy to join this group and talk a little bit about Circa's current work planning for coastal flood resiliency with the town of Stonington in downtown Mystic. So for those that don't know me, I'm John Trzynski. I'm the Director of Resilience Planning at Circa. Hopefully folks are pretty familiar with Circa at this point. Jim O'Donnell's our Executive Director, and we've been around for about 10 years. And, I'm not going to spend too much time on that at this point. But the Resilient Connecticut program, so just to give a little bit of context of what we're doing and where this particular study is coming out of, it's a planning program that started in the southwestern part of Connecticut after Sandy. In the last couple of years, we've been working in the southeastern part of the state. And the goal of the program is to help build out the state's project pipeline for resilience. And there's a couple of different initiatives under that we've done. We created a climate change vulnerability index that allows us to kind of look across this part of the state or across other parts of the state and develop a list of priority locations, places that have a particular risk or a vulnerability associated with flooding. We also look at extreme heat and places that have that combination of risks. And so this is a map that just shows areas of the state that we've engaged through this Resilient Connecticut program. And, we've worked with the COGs throughout the state, almost all the COGs at this point. And our process usually is, we work with the COGs and we kind of do this regional vulnerability assessment process. And then we meet with each town and kind of get a sense of what the priorities, the local issues are. Usually that's done through the hazard mitigation planning process or kind of done in coordination with that. And so the blue and the purple icons are places where we've done more of a deeper dive site scale plan. And the idea, again, is to develop specific projects in a location and position those projects for federal and state funding for implementation. So this is just kind of a conceptual idea of how we think about the project pipeline, starting from the identification of a need or an issue, and then helping to get that into some sort of a plan, either a hazard mitigation plan or a capital improvement plan, through, developing a concept, doing benefit cost analysis, because that's a really critical piece for getting federal funding, for instance, and then doing additional phases of design, all the way through to implementation and construction and monitoring. And these red stars are places along this project pipeline that this program, Resilient Connecticut, has been so far focusing on trying to help towns develop plans and projects. And these are some of the communities that we've worked with to do more of the kind of site scale or neighborhood scale plans. So getting to the project in Stonington. So, the town of Stonington has been doing planning to look at coastal flooding and sea level rise for several years now. This image on the left is taken from the town's coastal resilience plan back in 2017, which was kind of a first attempt to sort of look across the whole town and identify priority locations where there's a particular flood risk that's, possibly being made worse due to climate change and sea level rise. And so downtown Mystic was identified as a clear priority within that plan. And there was a couple of ideas and strategies that were developed, initial kind of ideas, I think, as part of that plan. And then in 2022, 2023, there was an update. The Southeastern COG conducted an update to the hazard mitigation plan. And Circa actually worked with the COG as part of that. And this was the first time there was an effort to look at how climate change might be exacerbating some of the hazards that are in your traditional hazard mitigation plan for the Southeastern COG. And again, coastal flood risk, downtown Mystic, not surprising, identified as a key issue for the town. And there was an annex that included a table of different actions that spanned, looking at ways to protect and flood-proof the wastewater treatment plant, looking at floodproofing at the Mystic Fire Station, looking at some of the key roadways, Holmes Street, the seawall at Holmes Street, and assessing the possibility of elevating that road and some of the other roads as well. So planning has been underway in identifying this area as a key location of concern. In the last several years, Mystic has seen frequent flooding. So most of these photos were photos that I took back in December of 2022. And I think what we're seeing is that it doesn't take a hurricane or a tropical storm to cause pretty significant flooding in Mystic. All it takes is a strong low pressure system, high enough winds, and if we get a storm surge anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 feet, and that happens to coincide with high tide, then we start to see what the National Weather Service might consider moderate to approaching major, somewhere moderate flood conditions. And this is what we start to see in Mystic. I think when you look back historically, this type of storm surge in the 3 foot, 3.5 foot range is something that would happen on a every 10-year basis or so. And I think what's been alarming about the last couple of years is that we're starting to see this type of flooding multiple times per year. And this is something that in Circa's assessment of sea level rise and how that's changing the frequency of flooding, something that we're concerned about is that it's these more kind of common, frequent low pressure systems that when you add sea level rise to them, change the frequency of flood risk. And so, that's something that we're trying to focus on, that more frequent chronic flooding issue as a priority for adaptation. So I took the 3 photos, except for the one from the seaport. I got that one from a colleague. So, during the vulnerability assessment process with the COG, this was identified as a place that we call a resilience opportunity area. So, when Circa works with the towns and the COGs, we create an inventory of these resilience opportunity areas. It's a place where there's just specific concerns that could be addressed through a planning process. And some of the things that we had identified as part of that is, just the number of historic resources in downtown Mystic, and that's a particular type of condition that it is different than just elevating or flood proofing a normal structure. So there's considerations that we have to think about when we think about historic resources. I mentioned some of the critical facilities. There's also the Amtrak rail station, and also just some of the key roadways, low-lying roads that flood in different types of conditions that are a focus of what we're doing. So our particular study, this is basically the area of the study that includes most of the downtown area up to about where the seaport is, and then down to about Seaport Marine. It's the Stonington side of Mystic, so we're not looking at Groton. And the goals of the project are really to develop some strategies to mitigate coastal flooding, and develop some of those strategies into a conceptual designs, and then position those designs as projects for additional funding and implementation. So we have a group of consultants that we work with on this, and for this project we are working with Fuss and O'Neill, and my colleague Beth Kermsey is also on the call. She's going to be doing a lot of the leading the engagement process with their team. And these are just some things that they have laid out as key sort of goals of their design approach, really trying to make the design process as interactive and iterative as possible. Obviously I mentioned looking at the critical facilities and critical transportation corridors, wherever we can utilize green infrastructure, we would like to prioritize that as well. So that's what we're hoping to do here. So the schedule for this project, we've been working on this for a few months now. The Circa team actually developed a model of the existing flooding conditions and the future flooding conditions, and that work was done over the summer. And we had a first meeting of a project advisory committee in October. So we had a kickoff of that advisory committee, and we're hoping to have another meeting of the advisory committee for this project in the next month or so. And that next meeting will be to sort of get into the details of the flood maps and looking at some of the specific areas of concern. And then what's interesting about this is that Fuss would like to kind of condense the workshop public engagement process into a more intensive 3-day visioning community planning workshop. And this is something that they've used in some other projects to some success. So we're going to try it here. And I think the idea is that you could have this sort of months of back and forth and trying to get people's schedules to align. And the idea being that maybe if we can condense into 3 days, we can have more of a back and forth where there are opportunities for the public to provide feedback, and then they can incorporate that into their design process, and then there can be sort of a back and forth over a couple of days. So these are some of the ideas at this point. None of this is set in stone at the moment, but I think the idea is to have a couple of public open house workshop meetings, have some meetings with the advisory committee, also a walk shop. So they would be leading a walking tour of the project area, and just having a more intensive conversation. And what we're hoping to do is to have this 3-day visioning session in sometime in late January, early February, I believe is the time frame that we're hoping to do. Okay, so our study is not the only one that's going on. There's a lot going on in the region, and there's been a lot going on over the last couple of years. And this slide is kind of trying to just highlight a few of those things. I'm sure most of you are familiar that the town of Groton, conducted a resiliency study of the Groton side of downtown Mystic last year, and there were some recommendations that came out of that. There is also a study that's funded by Sea Grant, looking at the upper part of the Mystic River watershed. And this is something through the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed, which is a local nonprofit group that has been meeting monthly and doing engagement. I think primarily looking at water quality issues in the watershed, but also I think they're touching on some flood resiliency aspects as well. There's a number of other just more kind of site-specific projects like the Mystic River Boathouse Park, Living Shoreline. I know there's some things going on at Mason's Island, Living Shoreline project that's been in development there. The causeway to Mason's Island is been looked at. I think some initial looking at what it would take to elevate that or change that from a causeway to a bridge. And so there's just been a lot going on. I think it's going to be pretty critical as some of these plans are implemented that there's some way to coordinate between Groton, Stonington, as well as the town of Ledyard. Another area that I know is undergoing planning is Lantern Hill Road. And I think the town of Ledyard is actually doing a flood resiliency study for all of the culverts and crossings of Whitford Brook along Lantern Hill Road. So that's another kind of key piece of what's going on with the resiliency. So I think that's about all I have for now. Happy to take any questions or comments if folks have them.
If I might start, John, sorry for my delay. I was traveling around the country and came back in yesterday, and I didn't realize the connection I had was either stale or not working. So I sat through the tail end of the presentation. How would you help me out on the differential between what's been achieved in Groton with the resiliency study and where we are here? I'll give you background. So I'm trying to come through for a Greater Mystic tourism bill, and I was requested by some of the reps and senators to look at the resiliency issue, which I believe is a fundamental issue. So there's two things. I'm trying to get a comparative between Groton and Stonington on what's been accomplished so far. And if we're looking at public infrastructure, how I look at either priorities, and that would be trying to figure out short and long-term projects. Like if I go and move ahead with some fundamental improvements to the tourism district between Mystic and Groton, I don't want them to be in conflict with resiliency, obviously.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out what things either are going to work and be incorporated into later plans or would be starts to a resiliency plan. I'm kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. As long as whatever I do isn't in conflict with sustainability and resiliency.
John, I'm very happy to jump in here too, but I'll follow your lead if you want.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll take a first crack at it, and then if you want to jump in, Beth, with your context. But yeah, as far as I know about the Groton, so Groton took, they did a year-long study. They came up with a couple of specific priority actions. I think those were to look at a couple of the key local roads on the Groton side that have flood risk. I think it's suspected that some of the outfalls are creating backflow from the Mystic River onto some of those local roads. So a lot of what I saw in the Groton study was about upgrading stormwater infrastructure, putting backflow prevention on the outfalls, and looking at elevating some of the roadways in Groton.
Okay.
All of that is a lot easier said than done, of course, but those are the priorities as far as I know in Groton. There are some sort of best practices for building owners and business owners as well as residential properties. So there is kind of this difference between the sort of public, the stormwater infrastructure, the roads. That's one set of issues. Then you have the residential properties. That's another set of issues. And then you have the business owners. And I think there's probably different strategies with all three of those buckets. And so I think they have that. And I think the town of Groton, as far as I know, is moving ahead with a town-wide resiliency action plan, or I think it's a climate action plan, that they're currently hiring a consultant for that. So that's as far as I know what's going on with Groton. Beth, do you have any
Yeah,
additional
let,
context on
let me
that?
jump in just a little bit. So we followed along with their downtown Groton resiliency plan pretty closely. And now that we're working on the other side of the bridge, we're making sure that the two plans speak to one another, that we're using similar metrics, and that we're evaluating these concerns that have already been raised by the Mystic community, which I'm sure you know doesn't necessarily recognize a divide on the bridge in practice, right? From a community point of view. John, you're right. They have the RFP out. It just closed for the community resilience plan. And Groton is also moving ahead with a stormwater drainage plan for downtown Mystic on their side. And so those things are happening. But if I'm can take a step back, I think early on in this process, we worked in the process, by which I mean looking at resilience in Mystic and on the Mystic River. We worked alongside Circa during the HMCAP process with COG. At the time, we were under contract with the Mystic Seaport Museum to develop an application for them to obtain funding. As I'm sure many of you on this call know, the seaport has experienced flooding at astronomical rates compared to the flooding that they experienced over past years, and have a high level of vulnerability. When we started exploring the possibility of helping the seaport look at ways to become more resilient, we realized that this problem is one that needs to be solved at the watershed scale. And as such, solving a problem at a watershed scale with consistent solutions, consistent adaptations, consistent mitigations that are working in concert with one another. It's going to require working with the 4 municipalities and the 2 tribal nations that share that watershed. So one of the things on that map that you can see is that many of those projects have started to fall into place since those initial efforts with the seaport began a couple years ago. And with everyone at the table together, with the planning groups, with from the 4 municipalities and the 2 tribes working together in concert together to achieve a resilience goal and a resilience agenda for the Mystic River is something that is becoming more and more possible. Basically, we're filling in the map. The map has a number of sub-projects that are fundable via different funding sources, and that all together, what we're hoping to do is build a critical mass so that this community that shares the watershed is going to be not just eligible, but highly attractive to federal funding sources, to federal level brick grants, protect grants, etc., so that we can together work towards achieving that resilience goal and address these issues. We're very excited to hear about the opportunity to partner together that Representative Meskers that you just mentioned. Because if this project vision for resilience in Mystic and of course downtown Mystic as the crux of the vulnerability, not only does it house the major economic driver for the region, or one of the major economic drivers, it's certainly at the base of a watershed, and so it is receiving waters from coastal surge, but also from stormwater surge. Those two are meeting in downtown Mystic, so the pollutants that carry from those are also meeting there, and then that's also an epicenter of our not just economics but historic resources, our cultural resources. It's the epicenter of what makes our region so special. And as such, to address those problems, those vulnerabilities, those risks that culminate in downtown Mystic, I think that the approach that is underway to look at the watershed holistically will yield great results, not only to mitigate the risks and present a path forward that's more resilient, not just for downtown, but for the entire watershed community and that shared community, and that we will be able to bring this, to elevate this through this demonstration of collaboration to attract the funding necessary to implement these solutions.
Thank you. So I'll frame it out from my point of view, which is more commercial.
Sure.
So at the de minimis, I have to make sure that whatever we're thinking of doing doesn't conflict with our resiliency plan. Now, that's not my baseline, but I'm thinking in the worst case scenario on the achievable objectives, we have to work in sympathy and coordination, that making sure that anything we propose to do in the area for tourism doesn't either accentuate, aggravate, or negate any remediation and resiliency programs or structures we're trying to accomplish. So that would be a baseline I'd want to tell you that I would think that our committee is on board with. The second one, which you actually, or the third, the second is I'm looking to raise to get a consensus on projects dedicated more to tourism, and I think personally the resolution of traffic, to figure out what to do to begin to make the area more attractive for, I guess, for the residents, for the workers, and for the tourists, so that the traffic isn't an obstacle to quality of life issues for everyone involved. So that's where I'm kind of sitting at the beginning of this. And lastly, where you kind of excited me, although I'm not sure whether we're in conflict, in the search for federal dollars is I think what's becoming more and more obvious to me in various conversations with some of the commissioners, and I won't put them on the spot today, but people tell me that the area in a coordinated fashion needs to develop a plan. And I think it's a plan from your point of view, on resiliency. From my point of view, it's on tourism. But a coordinated plan to tell the feds what we're hoping to accomplish and to seek out the resources to accomplish those goals is what we need. That, I think, was where I started the initiative for the Greater Mystic Tourism Group as well. It's that we need to have a unified voice in what we want to achieve. Frankly, I've looked at a traffic study, which I thought was very good at highlighting the traffic problems, but I couldn't get a priority list of solutions, which is what I'm going to be looking to drive this group towards, or make the proposals, have a hearing and find out whether the proposals float. I would be looking at both of you to work in coordination on the ideas of the priorities on resiliency and infrastructure. And I'm going to ask you two things which would be helpful for our group. Are the low-hanging fruit, and I don't mean price-wise, although hopefully that's part of it. The low-hanging fruit being what's achievable in the short term in projects and what become 3 to 5 to 10-year projects. And when we think about infrastructure, we think about resiliency, or I think about tourism. All of them have Band-Aids, and I don't mean that, people use that word negatively. All of them have marginal fixes, incremental fixes, and fundamental fixes. A lot of times, if I'm thinking resiliency as well, I think some of the fundamental fixes are either very capital intensive potentially, or long-term in range and planning. Not that I'm opposed to those. I want to try to figure out what we walk away with actionable items in the short term, and potentially if we move forward, how do we advocate both on the tourism and resiliency side and have standing cognizance to make sure that we get things done, right? I mean, I stood up the committee, or the working group, sorry, on tourism for Mystic, because I've had requests from individual legislators for particular projects, and I thought we needed coordination. I'm hearing the same thing now on resiliency. So the question may be, that may be part of the conversation we need to have, and I'll have to bring this to my chamber and reserve what purviews we think we have in the House and the Senate to figure out how we do going forward on the purview of both resiliency. Is that more the purview of COG? What do we do with tourism? Is that the executive or legislative? I mean, there are different people who are all involved, but I want to make sure that we're all in a happy coordination on that. Those are kinds of the thoughts. Any thoughts? Not to put you like horribly on the spot, but if we turned around and said achievable goals in the 1 to 3 year range, 3 to 5 year range. I mean, I know it's because there are two different things. What I'm hearing about is you're going to walk out with a bunch of proposals, and then you're going to ask for public feedback.
So I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with you in a smaller group and share our the tracked opportunities that have emerged from the projects that exist already. Talk about how there have been a couple of different efforts to rank those projects, prioritize those projects, and also to organize them along the lines of a timeline that's responsive to the pressures relative to climate change risk. So, and I think through a in the weeds discussion that we would be able to not only demonstrate that resilience doesn't happen. Who cares if we control the floodwaters if we don't have what you're trying to promote, right? There are two sides of the coin that have to be talking to each other. So I would welcome that opportunity if it.
I'd like to jump into that. I think the need for someone to take the lead in coordinating between the different plans is, I think currently that's a gap. I think the towns are doing things in isolation, and it's not clear who the entity is that is going to do the organizing that you're describing, which I think is doable. And so I think that's just so you understand that, Circa is funded to do this particular project. And then, Beth is part of a consultant team that's working on some other projects along with us. So I think we need to decide who's going to take the lead. Is it the COG? Is it this group? Or, I mean, it's something that Circa could do, but we're not currently sort of charged to do that. And I do think that there's a need for somebody to kind of bring these plans together into like the 1 to 3, the 3 to 5. Here's the low hanging fruit. Here's the next steps for each of those. So I just
So
wanted to make
the
sure that's clear.
Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed did put in a Long Island Sound Futures Fund application in order to provide that. If it is successful and awarded, then they will own this opportunity to prioritize and put together a comprehensive plan
Is that for the watershed or for resiliency though?
for the watershed.
So I'm
Yeah, I
not
think
saying that's in conflict. That becomes a dovetail, right? It's like I'm not opposed to the water. I obviously I'm not opposed to clean water or better watershed.
So
But
it's not just clean water and it's not just flooding. The Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed has an economic focus as well as a cultural focus as well. So they're trying to bring together all four of those focus areas into one comprehensive plan, which they're calling the Watershed Resilience Action Plan. And it's cultural, economic, and physical resilience that they're going after. But I think if there is an opportunity, like John was just saying, to have an agency with the state also be interested in that scale and working those four threads together, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to reserve purview there, but so that would either fit through the executive, i.e. the governor's office and an agency thereof, or through the legislature, or a combined joint standing group, right? Those are things, I don't know that we've engaged in that before, but that's where I wanted to start the process of economic development in Mystic, coordination of Mystic and Groton, and then it's coordination across the state agencies and or the legislature to figure out how do we move the needle forward. As a legislator coming from a different part of the state, that's one of the reasons my interest was piqued by this, because on commerce, I was getting hit with various bills for tourism. They were standalone projects. So the hope in this project was, or in this endeavor, is to begin to knit together the various needs and figure out what we're doing and to coordinate the spending in of that we are achieving a lot of the long-term goals and not just doing individual projects. I can see
there's a lot of hands up.
Carrying a one-on-one dialogue here. Let's go on to Jim first, and we'll go left to right. I apologize.
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to make 2 points. The first point, is, well, first I agree with the need to coordinate, but I think the idea of considering traffic and economic development at the same time we're considering resilience in this area is innovative. I don't think anywhere else in the country we've really done that effectively, because there's sort of 2 problems you highlighted. One is traffic and the other is resilience. And so trying to be efficient in use of funds does drive us to, in this case, to try and do both things at once. Now, as I'm the executive director of Circa, and I want to just highlight that we've got complete the obligations we undertook and the contracts we have. And so the project Beth was talking about is got a plan. We're going to finish it and execute it. However, in addition, we also have some latitude in expending effort. And I think because this is a project which is innovative in its challenges and it's got multiple uses, and other parts of the state should probably do the same thing. That is, consider how to do development at the same time reducing CO2 emissions and making the whole region more resilient. It's worthwhile for us thinking about how to invest some effort in the next few months in trying to develop and perhaps even produce some advice to this committee on projects that could be done in the near future. So that will take like a little consultation between John and me on available resources, and you and the others in the committee on the times and that's the time that would be time horizons for which information would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I'll tell you, I'm glad you found it innovative. All of our environmental and resiliency programs generically are attempting to sway the public through externalities, right? The costs of our carbon footprint, the cost of not doing anything. And I thought this was a unique opportunity to combine what is a need economically in development with those issues, so that the invested dollar, even if they're, split between improving the traffic and mobility along with resiliency, we're enhancing the entire economic output of the area, which is something, if we go strictly for resiliency without that enhancement, we're always playing defense economically because we're spending money to maintain the status quo, which is valuable. I mean, if you're defending shorelines or defending a good environment, shellfish beds, et cetera, you're defending economic. Here the opportunity is to expand. That's why I thought it might be unique, an opportunity.
No, I totally agree. And that's been a theme that we've tried to advance, that is spending money on resilience should also create other co-benefits. And in this case, there are actually two benefits straight up. It's not a co-benefit. The goal would be to manage traffic better, to accelerate economic development in the tourism area, at the same time protecting the infrastructure and the people for the future.
Yeah, just to quickly, the Resilience Improvement District, that idea that was in the last, I think it was in SB 11 last year, but that could be an interesting case where you could try to do a resiliency improvement district that would sort of explicitly bring together those two things.
Thank you. I'm going to continue on through the group, but just my concern with either a taxation district or resiliency district is it has to be in consultation very strongly with the DRS. And the issue with any type of activity where you're either making a claim on tax revenue or levying funds, like there's these there are water districts, or these water resiliency districts they're talking about, a stormwater district. Right?
Stormwater, yeah.
You have to be very prescribed, because there's always the risk that the revenue gets supplants existing and just eases the burden on continuing down the same path. So like whether it's a tourism district or a resiliency district, you want to be prescribed on where the incremental dollar is, so that it doesn't become a dollar that substitutes for an existing dollar. And money's fungible. So it's very hard to make sure structurally you've got the right controls, because that's just a general problem with targeting revenue, that we don't target the expenditure with either maybe a resiliency board or a tourism board. You really have to sit there and think who's going to have the sway on how the money is spent effectively. But I've got Bob, you've been waiting patiently. I apologize. And then Patrick. And then
thank you, Chair Meskers. Just a couple things to add. First of all, SB 11, although it didn't pass, there was some language in there about forming a advisory council. So again, just to call this out, I'm a co-chair of something that overlaps what we're talking about here, which is the Extreme Weather Mitigation and Resiliency Advisory Council for the Connecticut Insurance Department. A couple things on that, as well as I have the role of Deputy Advisor for Infrastructure under Commissioner Boughton. So there is an overlap here. I just want to call out from my conversations with Commissioner Mays with the Insurance Department, as well as Commissioner Boughton from an infrastructure perspective, that the advisory group is looking to study the needs of homeowners and small business owners with respect to fortification of their homes and places of business against potential losses due to natural disasters, hazards, and climate change. And then two, make recommendations concerning the feasibility of establishing a program to assist those homeowners and small business owners in fortifying their homes and places of business against such losses. So some of the recommendations that come out of this is some sort of structure and oversight of a program, potential incentives offered to homeowners and businesses in partnership with insurance industry leaders. James O'Connell is one of our esteemed members of our group. And then lastly, the intention would be for the working group to submit these recommendations and findings to Commissioner Mays, who eventually submit it to the OTG and a joint standing committee of the General Assembly. So that's one of the key areas. So I would just encourage this conversation at some point, Chair Meskers, maybe following up with a Commissioner Mays or following up with a Commissioner Boughton. And then separately offline, I'd love to talk more with Beth on how we can also, work together. So because of my other role with Commissioner Boughton, we are state infrastructure coordinators across the three major acts in partnership with DECD for Fed funds. So I'll stop there. I said a lot. But I'm definitely looking forward. I think this is a great conversation, and we do need to, I believe, work with the COGS in some meaningful way in order to sort of, better coordinate what we're all doing. We all want the right thing. It's just about how do we not, as you said, Chair Meskers, not go against some existing foundational aspects of a program or initiative, but just overlap it in a positive way to get that synergistic effect. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
And Bob, I just want to let you know the commissioner made me go with him to Denver.
Oh, is that right?
Got back for the NAIC meeting. And I'm embarrassed that you bring it up this way because Jim and Beth and John, we need to have that conversation with leaders of the insurance industry because there are questions about mitigation and whether we do public mitigation or private mitigation, the direct impact on insurance rates and fortifying and strengthening and the liability. There's another internal benefit, and that even accrues to the municipalities because once we get these the mitigating structures or mitigating exercises in place, the dangers of flooding, the dangers of coastal resiliency should decline or at least stop rising. So we should have that conversation with the property casualty people and through the commissioner's office, Andrew Mays, about what potential benefits also accrue to us on mitigation. And that was a conversation that was held with Andrew Mays, the commissioner, having dragged me to both. I was in Denver for the NAIC meeting, and I subsequently went on to San Antonio for the National Council of Insurance Legislators. And we're not hearing it much in Connecticut. People didn't realize our issues. I was hearing it in Oklahoma and Kansas about roofs and hail and tornadoes. So the industry is being approached with what types of mitigation or what kind of private and public partnerships to reduce liability for individual homeowners or property owners. So we should look at that. I definitely recommend that. That may not be part of the purview right here within my whole thing, but it's definitely something, and I'm on insurance as well. So we might have to have that conversation over there with some of the benefits accruing from the resiliency. Patrick.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. This question's for John. John, great job on the presentation. Super excited to see what you guys are doing. On one of the last slides, though, I noticed like projects, and one of them was a Route 27 resilience study by DOT, and I was just curious if you can give me a little bit more information on that. I gave a set presentation a couple weeks ago, and that wasn't on it, so I was just kind of curious where that information was coming from.
John, I can jump in that because that came from me.
Okay.
So we have heard from folks at CTDOT that Greenmanville Avenue is on the list for the Resilient Corridors projects. And when I saw you on the call, I was actually hoping that you might be able to give us more information on it. But it sounds like maybe it's just on a list and not
So
that it was potential.
so maybe offline maybe we can connect and kind of talk about who you're contacting. I do know the department's working on a resiliency improvement plan, so maybe that potentially were the idea, but it's very conceptual. We're not that far along in the process, so but I would like to at some point maybe we can discuss kind of where that information is coming from. So we're all-
Absolutely. Yeah, and let's set up a time to talk because how much of that is being addressed by CTDOT will mean that less needs to be addressed by other projects. But because Greenmanville Avenue is such an integral as an evacuation route and the primary connection between the two major economic areas that comprise downtown Mystic tourism, that we recognize it as a critical corridor. And as we kick this effort off, if we're able to rely on another project to fill in some of those gaps that we were showing on that map, all the better. We'd rather collaborate than duplicate, of course.
Thank you.
Excellent. Andre?
Yes, thank you, Representative Meskers. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're no feedback now.
Okay, excellent. I just want to thank Beth for your great presentation, and also John as well. Just going through this report, as John, you mentioned, Groton did a separate report for the Groton side of Mystic, and is now working on their climate action plan. Now with both sides of the river covered as far as resilience plan, I would say in the last year and a half, one thing that has been very promising and exciting to witness is more and more collaboration happening between both sides of the river, in particular at the governmental level. In the last 2 years alone, on the Groton side, Groton has hired a coastal resilience and sustainability manager, which is tasked with tackling climate and resilience related issues for the town of Groton. Megan Granato, and she's been hard at work coordinating with Circa and so many other local entities in the town of Stonington on critical matters where it does require significant collaboration. So that is something that I think has yielded a lot of dividends, just having more dialogue and conversation and sharing of ideas. I think it certainly, I don't think Southeastern Connecticut is unique to this, but maybe it's a Connecticut thing where at times it seems like we're coming up with plan after plan, and they sit on the shelves and collect cobwebs. But I think what we're seeing here is tying in of those key plans. For case in point, I think with the climate action plan, that is required to receive certain funding at the federal level as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's something, again, where it's so critical to have all of these key plans in place before coming up with these big projects to get funded. I do have a more specific question to Beth. I know we focused a tremendous amount on Mystic. Beth, I understand you're also working on a resilience plan for the city of Groton. City of Groton, home to our largest private employer in the state of Connecticut, Electric Boat. Most people assume that Mystic and southeastern Connecticut's quite a quiet area. I'd say quite the contrary in recent years, where we've seen an influx of young people moving in, and so as a result of that, in many cases we assume that building more leads to greater environmental degradation, but in reality, there is some truth to that. Resilience resilience infrastructure investment actually improves the environmental conditions of that neighborhood or that area. Can you explain some of the work you're doing there and how and what are some of the lessons that could be learned for the Mystic area with respect to improving economic development while also improving resilience?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. I appreciate that question. So we're engaged with the City of Groton via a contract with the Nature Conservancy to develop a plan for the Five Corners area that takes into consideration stormwater flows, extreme heat, and economic development and traffic management. And so combining all of those co-benefits together. Um, that project's just kicking off. So I know that our strategy, our process of evaluation that we're bringing to that project is very similar to the process of evaluation that we're bringing to this project in Stonington. And it's one that we have developed on other resilience projects that we've worked on throughout New England, where we evaluate resilience issues from multiple points of view in order to arrive at coordinated solutions that have co-benefits. So what I expect to be able to bring to the Five Corners neighborhood is a plan that identifies infill development, that identifies traffic management, where traffic is choreographed by infrastructure that is both positioned to intercept and treat stormwater, to alleviate flooding, where we need passage to service those businesses, to serve it, to allow people to get home and to leave home in the morning to get to work. We will also look for ways to establish green infrastructure where some of it will treat stormwater, but other green infrastructure will be positioned to mitigate the effects of extreme heat and make it a more livable environment. And in doing that, ultimately shape a sense of place that makes Five Corners more attractive to further development. We're much further along with a similar project for downtown Westerly on Main Street, where we have created a design for Main Street to intercept the stormwater flows. Those stormwater flows are intercepted at places where we specifically need to close down excessive curb cuts to improve traffic flow. Additionally, we're planting them with canopy material that will create corridors along an excessively the corridor is 90% paved at the moment, but the green infrastructure positioned to cut down on excessive traffic movements and organized traffic will create a barrier between sidewalks and the road to create a safer pedestrian passage. And the safer pedestrian passage will be traveling through cooling corridors that we're expecting to the design anticipates shade during the day so that you can make your way down Main Street as a pedestrian from shops. Westerly is looking to promote infill development and create a streetscape that is more pedestrian friendly to attract a different type of business than the suburban pull in, pull out vehicular oriented business model that's there now. So it reinvents the sense of place, makes a walkable community. The walkable community incents further economic investment. The economic investment is built on a framework that already takes into consideration stormwater needs, extreme heat needs, and eventually coastal surge as well.
Well, thank you so much for that, Beth and John. I would note, some of these lessons I think could definitely be applied just within the immediate watershed, technically the river. As you mentioned, a lot of the outfalls are pretty much failing, carrying a lot of sediment into the river from God only knows where. And that coordination between the town, the city, or the town and the state so critical, since the state also does own a lot of those outfalls as well. So I appreciate all of your insights to both of you, and appreciate Jim and your leadership at Circa. And maybe I still have to meet with Rob Hodling. We were supposed to meet last week, so maybe Beth, if you'd like to sit in on that meeting as well, that'd be great.
I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity.
You may
Thank-
need to invite me too, Representative Baumgartner.
Oh, absolutely. More the merrier. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent, excellent. From my clerk, where are we on the agenda? I seem to have lost my place. So if we have anything outstanding on the agenda?
I believe that's it.
Try that again.
Sorry about that. I believe that is it for the agenda.
Patrick, did you have any thoughts or comments from our last meeting?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as everybody knows, we gave like a set level presentation and we're looking at the legislation, and I just kind of want to do another type of set level just for our open discussion and what a multimodal transportation center is. FHWA defines it as a facility joining all modes of transportation, automobiles, public transit, that could be bus or rails, bicycles, pedestrians, and a convenient hub, which may include design elements such as adequate vehicle parking, such as parking garage, it's weather protected or transit passenger waiting or transfer area, transit passenger vehicle getaways. It accommodates all users. It could be storage for bicycles or scooters, e-bikes, e-scooters, which would probably be, maybe a nice green way to get around for Mystic. Potentially can have a visitor welcoming center, maybe convenience shops, restaurants, and or retail or other entertainment options. So it's not just for parking, but maybe it's a way for revenues to come into that. So just for the precipice of this conversation, I just wanted to say, like, if we're going after federal money, my recommendation to the working group is, would the municipalities consider potentially working with the region to go after a corridor study? I know we've had a lot of studies, but maybe with a potential corridor study, we can look at investments such as a multimodal transportation center. We know there's 3 major routes, right? We have 614, 27, and Route 1, right? Potentially, would the municipalities be interested in, making improvements to those roadways? The reason why I say that, because if you put a parking structure somewhere, right, it has to be able to accommodate the vehicles that are coming in, the vehicles that are leaving, potentially freight for our businesses, right? And, some of the concerns are capacity issues. What I'm afraid of, Mr. Chair, is we want a solid proposal to give to you that you can move forward with. And I know we talk about a lot of ideas, there's a lot of great things, but, from a Department of Transportation standpoint, at least with a corridor study, we can end up with feasible alternatives that we can go after state money, potentially federal grants. And I think it's important for the committee here to kind of weigh in to say, hey, is this the direction that we want to go in? What I can tell you is we've actually revamped our corridor study process with our COGS. And we're looking to redo an actual study, we're weighing it on the COGS that they can do like a pitch meeting. So once we do a study, the days of doing a study and it sits on a shelf for 20 years, it's over. We actually want the seriousness to come in, weigh it in as a priority. I can't speak on behalf of the region, but with the towns, you guys can prioritize with the COG. And it's a great opportunity to come with the department and say, hey, here's priority number 1 for us. This is what we want to do. And you can develop the scope. We've talked about easements. You talk about property outreach. How do we accommodate, our residents, our workforce, and our tourists, right? So doing a study like this of this magnitude gives us the opportunity to look at all that, and we can, hire a firm, or the region can hire a consultant to do all that legwork. What kind of permits are needed? Once again, with an in-detailed study, a larger study, you can look at a lot of the concerns that we have and try to make an approach to move forward with recommendations that we want to actually build. But by doing a detailed study like that, it builds the case and the factual information needed to go after the federal money. You just can't ask for millions of dollars of an investment without having the traffic counts, the data, the information that's really needed. And I'm going to go on, but that's kind of like the gist of what I wanted to say about potentially going after federal money. And the process that the department goes for is typically a quarter study.
So, Patrick, not to shortchange you because I appreciate that feedback. I think that's very helpful. I think the question becomes, do we come in as a group with 3 or 4 asks, which then you turn around and say, well, without the corridor study, they can't be done anyway, or there has to be a logic. But what I'm looking, when I think about it, Patrick, is I'd like us to stand forward on some priorities, on what we think we're trying to alleviate, what we're trying to accomplish as a tourism group, where our priorities are. And that may come back and you may throw us right back into the corridor study, but that's valid because we're looking for justification and do the hard work and make sure that the suggestions have validity. So that may not be a bad way. So I'm going to wrestle with, do we come back and ask for my only concern in going for a corridor study is I'd like to get the group in a coordinated fashion to list some priorities and then have a corridor study to say, well, priority 1 and 2 aren't good. We're at priority 3 or 4 versus having us, the last piece I read, Patrick, I'd spoken to you at one point about the 46-page traffic study, which I thought was an enormous suggestion of a bunch of issues without a prioritization of where we wanted to go. So I'm going to hope the group can get together on a priority list, and then you turn around and say, go, no go, or yes, we need a corridor study, and we sit back and look at how we get that funded. That may be logical. So I appreciate that. I don't know how that jives with what you just said, Patrick.
And it does. So it's not wasted, right? None of that work, the previous stuff from the traffic study, which is good. I think under chapter 6 had the recommendations, and it seemed like a lot of it was local, within the existing roadway, from parking meters or different creative ways to try to, fit parking through the tourist season. But that's just a stepping stone and where we want to go long term. So it's definitely not bad. Same thing with the RSAs and the previous work that's been done. I think that's all great information to add it in. But what's important about the study, if we want to move forward, is we're looking at like feasible projects, right? So it's getting past just the recommendations to say, hey, we want this hub. We want to bring people here. We know we need to make improvements on said roads, and this is how we're going to go about doing that. With the study, though, it also helps, Chair, is to address those concerns, right? Capacity, we can do the outreach to see what do the citizens feel, what is the tourist analysis and stuff like that. One of the recommendations, not to change, but we had talked about potential for shuttles for DOT funding. Right now at this point, the DOT does not have any funding program for shuttles. Or specifically for seasonal shuttles. Well, I just wanted to reiterate that through Park Connect, it's through DEP, that we have supported seasonal service expansions to some state parks in partnership with DEEP. And I think DEEP has paid 50% of those costs. So the municipalities may have access to that organization that could help with transportation needs short term while we talk about the long term.
Yeah, and if you think about that with DEEP, with their issues with parks, but also with their mitigation strategies on carbon and circulation, there may be 2 justifications for seasonal transportation.
So can I jump in for a second? This is Senator Summers. I've been listening patiently to everybody talk about the town I represent. So I would agree with a long-term study. However, we did one when Rob Simmons was the congressman, and I'll try to dig that out. There was I know it was a while ago, but there may be some still good information in there. There was a intermodal transportation study done for the Mystic area, and they called it the Golden Triangle with the seaport, the aquarium, and Old Mystic Village. And I'll try to dig that report out and get it to everyone. But I do think,
hold on, so just I'll recommend that we get that become a topic for the next conversation in lieu of the recommendation of the corridor study. Let's just look and everything we've talked about. let's, if it short changes, I agree. We'll put it in front of everyone.
And just
And
one-
if I can finish, let me just
Yep.
finish,
Yep.
is, I do think that it's great to do a long-term corridor study, but I'd like to know what's the time frame, because as Representative Gardner can attest to, we can't wait another 5 years before we do something, because it's becoming, this coming weekend, we have a lighted boat parade. And typically we have about 40,000 people saying they're coming. We already have over 80,000 people saying they're coming. So you're going to see the traffic backed up at least to the Gold Star Bridge to try to get into downtown Mystic that day. So it is a considerable problem that I think we need a short-term and a long-term solution to. Some of the short-term ideas that we come up with, I don't think that they are necessarily invalid. They could be used as part of an overall transportation system that we could develop, but I don't want us to have to wait. And I know how long the DOT takes. No offense to the DOT. Government is supposed to be incremental, and they do a really good job at that. So I would like to try to dig out that old study, share it with everybody, and just keep in mind that I will be asking for something. Hopefully it's as this group is together. And I don't want to speak for Representative Andre Baumgartner, but we really are in a position where we are requested continually, daily, to do something about the traffic in Mystic, and it's all year long now. So just throwing that out there, I think we need short-term, even if it's a stopgap until we could get a larger full-blown study, but just wanted to put that 2 cents in. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Senator Summer. It's not lost on me, which is why if you heard, one of my requests was whether or not anything we do now, as long as it fits within the constraints of both mitigation, stormwater, and resiliency, wouldn't be in conflict. So yeah, I'm cognizant that we need to find short and long-term solutions. So I appreciate that. Just as a note administratively, Beth joined the call. Beth, you're engaged in a study for the town of, or were engaged in a study for the town of Stonington, was it, or Groton?
We're currently under contract with Circa to provide the analysis, the resilience analysis for downtown Mystic.
Okay. So basically, I just need to do that administratively because publicly you weren't on the agenda. And I need to make sure that I included that in terms of our declaratories, because it's not just an open agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I see. In deference, I'm going to put the select person, I believe. Danielle Cheeseborough is on the phone. Go ahead, Danielle.
Just two housekeeping items. So I just wanted to clarify for your notes. What Circa's doing is on the Stonington side, and just because I think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier about, we're doing a good job, but we can always do better coordinating with our partner towns and regions. So just say this is focused on the Stonington side of Mystic. And then just to what Senator Summers raised, very much agree. And just to say, I think one of our first meetings, we did share that multimodal study that she referenced. So you all should have it. And it's in kind of the files that had already been shared.
Yeah, and I want to just state for clarity's sake, if anyone's worried, I'm not looking at a long-term plan to be shelved or a long-term plan to lead us to a point of inaction. I'm looking for short-term actionable plans. I'm looking at a long-term plan from the point of view of securing state and federal funding sources in a coordinated fashion. Because what's clear to me is we have not come with a plan to our federal delegation or to the Department of Transportation at the federal level to start talking about the funding we want, what we want to achieve. I think that coherence may require a little time. Notwithstanding that, we need to find short-term solutions to existing problems. So those aren't mutually exclusive. I'm not a librarian by nature. I'm not looking for a book to put on the shelf. So that's what we're having this meeting to try to get somewhere. Kate, you're next.
Yeah, my recollection was that the result of the Golden Triangle transit study was a piece of legislation that did provide some funding for a shuttle, and that it was not pursued because it was insufficient funding. However, is that money still available? And if it is, could that be dovetailed with deep funds for the park access to provide some pilot in the coming season. I think that might be a short-term win.
Okay. Thank you. I'll direct that towards our local delegation. It's before my time, so maybe they can find out what the status is. I appreciate it. Jim, you had raised your hand. Do you have anything you wanted to say, or have you?
No, well, it's like I think Senator Summers said it much more effectively than I did. But I'm entirely in favor of trying to isolate some things that we can do in the very short term, as well as making a plan, as you said, which addresses resilience and mitigation.
Perfect. So hearing no other comments for today, I'm going to wrap up the call. I think I have to salute Representative Baumgartner, who dragged me into the coastal resiliency conversation as I was looking at economic development, and thoroughly unwashed on the subject as it relates to the individuals, Jim, Beth, all that you brought to the table, and John, and Hodling, Rob. It's been incredibly helpful, and I wasn't circumspect or not supportive. It looked to be outside the purview, but clearly, as we wove through the conversation today, it's at the heart. It's the heart of the conversation that we need to address the issue concomitantly with what we're trying to achieve. So I'm very happy and thankful for all of you, and particularly Representative Baumgartner, who I remember chewing on my leg as I was drafting legislation on the issue of coastal resiliency. So I want to sound you out on that. And I want to thank you. And I want to thank Representative Cheeseman, who has asked me numerous times about this and its applicability. I think as you sat through these meetings, Representative Cheeseman, and see the complexity, what we're trying, and I want us to go back to that, what we're trying to do is achievable results in the short term, longer term planning issues. If we do this right, the model is transferable to various parts of the state, certainly along the shoreline communities for our blue economy, for growing the state. So I think what we do here matters in terms of both coherence and effectiveness. So I am going to continue to push. I'm not sure how, but push for short-term, long-term proposals and a strategy in how to achieve those, which is, as we've started to talk about, state and federal funding, the various pots of money that are available, how we coordinate with some of the other groups that are doing stuff in this region. So thank you. Any concluding comments? Being it's the Monday before Thanksgiving, I assume we're going back to our normal schedule of meetings, which would be, I assume, this first week in December, but more on that. I'll try to circulate an email with a proposal for 2 dates in that first week in December to see if that works, or if we have to move to the second week. And I'd love to have individual conversations with any of the people who spoke today about sparking my focus and interest in where we in trying to drive this to some higher level agenda items to move this forward. I want to get actionable plans in place for proposals for public hearings to bring things forward. I think that's what we really need. And Bob, thanks a lot for throwing me back into the insurance mix of it. That was very important. I think it has great value for us all. All right. I believe that ties up our meeting for today. I want to thank you all for your contribution, and everyone have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.